The autumn wind carried the scent of dust and dying grass across the small settlement of Cedar Ridge as Sarah Mitchell gripped the rough wooden bedpost with white knuckles. The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last, while her sister Emma wiped her forehead with a damp cloth. "Almost there, Sarah. Almost there," Emma whispered, though her voice trembled with worry. The nearest doctor was 2 days' ride away, and the midwife had taken ill with fever just yesterday. Sarah was on her own, except for Emma's inexperienced but loving hands. Outside, thunder rumbled across the darkening sky, and Sarah could hear the men talking in low, urgent voices on the front porch of her small cabin. Her husband James had been dead for 3 months now, killed in a mining accident up in the mountains. She had been managing alone, working their small farm with determination that impressed even the hardest men in town. "Push now, Sarah. I can see the baby's head," Emma encouraged, her hands shaking as she tried to remember everything their mother had taught them about birthing before she passed. Sarah gave everything she had, her cry echoing through the small cabin as the storm finally broke outside. Rain began pelting the roof just as a tiny wail filled the room. Emma's face broke into tears of relief as she carefully lifted the baby. "It's a boy, Sarah. A beautiful, healthy boy." Sarah fell back against the pillow, exhausted but smiling through her tears, as Emma cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket their mother had sewn years ago. The storm seemed to calm, as if nature itself was welcoming the new life into the world. "Let me see him," Sarah whispered, and Emma placed the small bundle in her arms. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at her with dark eyes that reminded her so much of James. "Hello, little one. I'm your mama." Emma was cleaning up when they heard heavy footsteps on the porch, followed by a firm knock on the door. Sarah's peaceful moment was interrupted by a cold feeling in her stomach. She recognized those footsteps. "Mrs. Mitchell? It's Thomas Crane. I need to speak with you." Emma's face went pale. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew Thomas Crane. He owned the largest ranch in the territory and had a reputation for getting what he wanted one way or another. He had been sniffing around Sarah's property since James died, making offers that weren't really offers at all. "Tell him I'm resting, Emma," Sarah whispered, holding her baby closer. Emma went to the door but didn't open it. "Mr. Crane, my sister just gave birth. She needs her rest." "I'm not leaving until I speak with her. This is important business that can't wait." Sarah heard at least 3 other voices outside. Crane had brought men with him. Her heart started racing, but she forced herself to stay calm for the baby's sake. Emma looked back at Sarah with frightened eyes, then reluctantly opened the door just a crack. What business could be so urgent? Thomas Crane pushed the door open wider, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and cold blue eyes. His expensive clothes and polished boots marked him as someone used to power and respect. "I've come to discuss Mrs. Mitchell's situation. With a new baby and winter coming, she'll need protection and provision. I'm prepared to offer both along with marriage." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't a proposal. It was a demand disguised as an offer. She had heard how Crane acquired other properties, always making it seem like he was doing people favors when he was really taking what he wanted. "Mr. Crane," Sarah called out, her voice stronger than she felt, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of caring for my child and my property." Crane stepped into the cabin, followed by 2 of his ranch hands. Emma backed away nervously. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're being unrealistic. A woman alone with a newborn baby? The wolves will come when winter sets in. The Apache could raid. You need a man's protection." "I have friends in town who check on me. I don't need marriage for protection." Crane's smile was thin and didn't reach his eyes. "Your friends can't be here every night. Your property borders mine, and I've seen signs of Indian movement in the hills. I'm offering you and your child safety, comfort, and a good life." Sarah understood what he wasn't saying. Refuse him, and accidents might start happening. Her livestock might go missing. Fences might get cut. Life could become very difficult very quickly. "I need time to think about such a big decision," she said carefully. "I'm afraid time is something you don't have. I need an answer tonight." The baby stirred in Sarah's arms, making small noises. She looked down at her son, then back at Crane. She wouldn't let this man control her life or her child's future, but she also couldn't fight him alone. "Mr. Crane, even if I wanted to accept your offer, I just gave birth an hour ago. Surely you can give me a few days to recover. The longer you wait, the more dangerous your situation becomes. I can protect you starting tonight if you agree." One of his ranch hands, a thin man with nervous eyes, shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, maybe we should let the lady rest. We could come back tomorrow." Crane shot him a look that made the man step back. "I make the decisions here, Bill." Sarah was about to respond when they all heard a horse approaching at a gallop. The rider pulled up outside, and Sarah heard boots hit the ground. A moment later, a voice called out from the porch. "Everything all right in there? Saw a lot of horses outside and thought I'd check?" Sarah didn't recognize the voice, but Emma moved toward the window to look out. "It's a stranger," she whispered. "Cowboy by the look of him." Crane's face darkened. "This doesn't concern you, stranger. Move along." "Well now, that's not very neighborly," the voice replied with a hint of amusement. "Especially on a night like this. Sounds like there might be a new baby in there, judging by what I heard when I rode up. Thought I might offer congratulations and see if any help was needed." Sarah made a quick decision. "Please come in. We could use a friend right now." Crane turned to her with anger flashing in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Mitchell." The stranger stepped into the doorway, and Sarah got her first look at him. He was tall and lean, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and steady brown eyes. His clothes were well worn but clean, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Most importantly, his hand rested casually near his gun belt in a way that suggested he knew how to use it. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat brim politely, "I'm Jake Morrison. I was riding through when I heard you might need assistance." "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my sister Emma. I just had a baby." Jake's eyes moved from Sarah to Crane and his men, taking in the situation quickly. "Congratulations, ma'am. That's wonderful news." His tone was warm when he spoke to Sarah, but cooled considerably when he looked at Crane. "I hope everyone here is celebrating this blessing with proper respect." "This is a private matter," Crane said firmly. "You need to leave." Jake studied him calmly. "Private matters don't usually require 3 armed men to discuss them with a woman who just gave birth. Makes a person wonder what kind of private matter it might be." Sarah saw her chance. "Mr. Morrison, Mr. Crane has made me a proposal of marriage, and he wants an answer tonight. I've told him I need time to think, but he says time is something I don't have." Jake's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. "Is that right? Well, Mr. Crane, I'm sure you understand that a lady who just brought new life into the world deserves time to rest and consider such important decisions without pressure. This doesn't concern you, Morrison. Actually, it does. I knew James Mitchell. We worked together on a cattle drive 2 years ago. Good man. Before he died, he asked me to look in on his wife if I ever passed through Cedar Ridge. Guess today's that day." Sarah felt a surge of hope, though she couldn't remember James mentioning Jake Morrison. But the cowboy's presence was already changing the atmosphere in the room, and Crane's men looked less confident than they had moments before. "James never mentioned you," Crane said suspiciously. "James and I didn't run in the same circles as you, Crane. We were working men, not land grabbers. The insult hung in the air. Crane's hand moved toward his gun, but Jake was already watching his every move. "I think you gentlemen should leave now," Jake said quietly. "Mrs. Mitchell needs her rest, and this conversation can happen another time when she's recovered from childbirth." "I'm not leaving without an answer," Crane insisted. Sarah spoke up, her voice stronger now, with Jake's presence giving her courage. "Then my answer is no, Mr. Crane. I won't be marrying you or anyone else right now. I have a baby to focus on, and I can take care of myself." Crane's face flushed with anger, but Jake stepped slightly forward, his hand now resting on his gun handle. "The lady has given you her answer. Time to respect it and move along." For a long moment, the cabin was silent except for the rain on the roof and the baby's soft breathing. Finally, Crane smiled, but it was a cold, threatening expression. "This isn't over, Mrs. Mitchell. Winter's coming and you'll find out how hard it is to survive alone. When you change your mind, my offer might not be so generous." He turned to Jake. "And you, Morrison. This territory belongs to people who understand how things work. Drifters don't last long here." "I'll keep that in mind," Jake replied evenly. Crane and his men filed out of the cabin. Sarah heard them mount their horses and ride away, but she knew this was just the beginning. Crane wasn't the type of man who accepted no for an answer. "Thank you," she said to Jake once they were gone. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Jake removed his hat and ran his fingers through his hair. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that, especially tonight. Is there somewhere safe you can stay? Maybe in town with friends?" Emma spoke up. "Sarah, you could come stay with me and Robert. We have room." Sarah looked down at her baby, then around the cabin she and James had built together. "This is my home. I won't be driven out by Thomas Crane." "Ma'am, I respect that, but Crane isn't the type to give up easy." "You might want to consider your options." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "You said you knew my husband. Were you really friends?" Jake was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could see him weighing his words. "I knew James, yes. We worked together briefly. But I'll be honest with you. I didn't know him well enough for him to ask me to check on his wife. I said that to give Crane something to think about." Sarah appreciated his honesty. "Then why did you help me?" "Because I don't like seeing people bullied, especially women with newborn babies. And because I've heard of Thomas Crane. He's got a reputation for taking what he wants, regardless of what's right." Emma was putting the birthing supplies away, but Sarah could tell she was listening to every word. The baby stirred in Sarah's arms, and she looked down at his tiny face. "What am I going to do?" she whispered, more to herself than to Jake. "First, you're going to rest and recover from childbirth. Then we'll figure out how to keep you and your son safe." "We?" Sarah looked up at him in surprise. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, I'd like to help if you'll let me. At least until you're back on your feet and can make good decisions about your future." Sarah studied his face, looking for any sign that he might be like Crane, someone who helped only to gain control. But Jake's eyes were clear and honest, and when he looked at her baby, his expression softened with genuine warmth. "Why would you do that for strangers?" "Because it's the right thing to do, and because every child deserves to grow up free from bullies like Thomas Crane." Emma finished cleaning up and came to sit beside Sarah. "I think we should accept his help, at least for tonight. You need sleep, and I don't think Crane is done with us." Sarah was exhausted, both from the birth and from the confrontation with Crane. Her body ached, and all she wanted was to hold her baby and sleep, but her mind was racing with worry about what Crane might do next. "If you stay," she said to Jake, "I want you to know I can't pay you much. The farm barely produces enough for me to live on." "I'm not looking for payment. Just a place to rest my horse and maybe a meal when you're able." Sarah made her decision. "Then you're welcome to stay. The barn has a good loft and there's feed for your horse." "Thank you, ma'am. I'll take care of my horse and then keep an eye on things tonight. You two get some rest." After Jake left for the barn, Emma helped Sarah settle into bed with the baby beside her. The storm was moving off, but Sarah could still hear thunder rumbling in the distance. "Do you trust him?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah looked out the window toward the barn, where a soft light flickered in the loft. "I don't know yet, but he's better than the alternative." As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah held her baby close and wondered what the morning would bring. She had made an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory, but she had also found an unexpected ally in Jake Morrison. Whether he would prove to be her salvation or just another problem remained to be seen. Outside, Jake settled into the barn loft with his rifle across his knees, watching the road for any sign of Crane's return. He knew men like Thomas Crane didn't give up easily, and he suspected this was just the beginning of Sarah Mitchell's troubles. But as long as he was here, no harm would come to her or her child. It was a promise he made to himself as he kept watch through the night, protecting a woman and baby he had just met, but felt strangely committed to defending. Sarah woke to the sound of chopping wood and the smell of coffee brewing. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, and for a moment she forgot about Thomas Crane and the events of the previous night. Her baby was sleeping peacefully beside her, his tiny fist curled near his face. Then reality came flooding back. She carefully picked up her son and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Emma cooking breakfast and Jake outside splitting firewood with smooth, efficient strokes. "How are you feeling?" Emma asked, looking up from the stove. "Tired, but better." "How long has he been working?" "Since dawn. He milked your cow, fed the chickens, and brought in enough wood to last a week. Said he wanted to make sure you had everything you needed before he moved on." Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. Of course he would be leaving. Why had she expected anything different? Jake appeared in the doorway, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. "Morning, ma'am. How are you and the little one doing?" "We're well, thank you. Emma tells me you've been busy." Jake shrugged. "Figured I'd make myself useful. Your animals needed tending, and you've got enough on your hands with a new baby." Sarah noticed he had avoided mentioning that he was leaving. "Won't you sit and have breakfast with us? It's the least we can do after all your help." "That's kind of you, ma'am." As they ate, Sarah studied Jake more carefully. He was polite and respectful, but there was something guarded about him, as if he was used to keeping people at a distance. His hands showed the calluses of hard work, and she noticed a scar along his left temple that looked like it had come from a bullet. "Where are you headed, Mr. Morrison?" Emma asked. Jake hesitated before answering. "North, toward Montana. I have family there I haven't seen in a while." "That's a long ride. Will you be stopping in town before you go?" "Probably should. Need to pick up some supplies." Sarah was about to suggest he be careful in town when they heard riders approaching. Jake immediately stood and moved to the window, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. "3 men," he said quietly. "Not Crane, but they're riding like they've got business here." Sarah's heart started racing, but Jake's calm presence helped steady her nerves. "Should we be worried?" "Let's see what they want first." The riders stopped in front of the cabin, and Sarah recognized them as local ranchers. Bill Henderson, who ran a small cattle operation south of town, and his 2 sons, Tom and Jim. They were good men who had been friends with James. Jake relaxed slightly, but didn't move away from the window. "Looks like friends." Sarah went to the door with the baby in her arms. "Good morning, Bill, Tom, Jim." Bill Henderson removed his hat, his weathered face serious. "Morning, Sarah. Heard you had your baby last night. Congratulations." "Thank you. Please come in." The Henderson men filed in, nodding respectfully to Emma and eyeing Jake curiously. Bill's gaze lingered on the stranger's gun belt and confident posture. "This here's Jake Morrison," Sarah said. "He helped us last night when we had some unexpected visitors." Bill's expression darkened. Crane. You heard about that? Word travels fast in a small town. Tom was in the saloon last night when Crane's men came in bragging about their boss making you an offer you couldn't refuse. Tom Henderson, a young man about 25 with his father's honest eyes, spoke up. They were saying you'd be married to Crane within the week, whether you wanted it or not. Sarah felt her face flush with anger. Is that what they're telling people? Afraid so, Bill said. That's why we're here. Some of us who knew James have been talking. We don't like what we're hearing. Jim, the younger Henderson's son, stepped forward. We want you to know you're not alone, Sarah. James was a good friend, and we look after our friends' families. Jake had been listening quietly, but now he spoke. How many men is Crane likely to bring if he decides to press his claim? Bill studied him carefully. You planning to stick around, Morrison? Depends on whether Mrs. Mitchell wants me to. Sarah looked at Jake, then at the Henderson men. These were good people offering help, but they were also farmers and small ranchers with their own families to protect. Going against Thomas Crane could cost them everything. I appreciate all of you coming here, she said carefully, but I don't want anyone getting hurt because of my problems with Crane. Sarah, Bill said firmly, James was like a brother to me. I promised him before he died that I'd look out for you if anything happened. That promise doesn't end just because Thomas Crane wants your land. It's not just about the land, Tom added. Crane's been pushing people around for years, taking what he wants and calling it business. Somebody's got to stand up to him eventually. Jake moved away from the window and leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. Standing up to him is one thing, but you need to understand what you're getting into. Crane's not just going to back down because a few neighbors object. What do you mean? Emma asked. I mean he's got money, men, and influence. If he wants Mrs. Mitchell's property and her as a wife, he'll use every tool at his disposal to get both. Bill nodded grimly. We know what kind of man he is, but we also know what kind of man James was, and what kind of woman Sarah is. Some things are worth fighting for. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. These men were willing to risk everything to protect her and her son. It was overwhelming and humbling at the same time. What are you suggesting? She asked. We take turns keeping watch on your place, Tom said. Make sure Crane knows you're not alone and undefended. And we spread the word in town about what really happened last night, Jim added. Make sure people know the truth, not just Crane's version. Jake was quiet for a moment, then spoke thoughtfully. That might work for a while, but Crane won't be deterred by a few neighbors taking shifts. He'll find another way to pressure Mrs. Mitchell. What would you do? Bill asked. First, I'd make sure Mrs. Mitchell and her baby have a safe place to go if things get dangerous. Then I'd try to find out what Crane really wants. Is it just the land, or is there something specific about this property that makes it valuable to him? Sarah had been wondering about that herself. Her farm wasn't particularly large or productive compared to others in the area. Why was Crane so determined to have it? James did mention something once, she said slowly, about finding interesting rocks up in the hills behind the house, but he never said what kind of rocks. Jake and Bill exchanged glances. You think there might be minerals up there? Bill asked. Could be. Or it could be that Crane just wants to control the water rights. Your creek runs through several other properties downstream. Sarah looked out at the small creek that provided water for her animals and garden. She had never thought about it being valuable to anyone else. Whatever his reason, she said firmly, I'm not selling, and I'm certainly not marrying him for it. Good for you, Bill said. We'll make sure he understands that. After the Henderson men left, promising to return that evening to keep watch, Sarah found herself alone with Jake and Emma while the baby napped. You don't have to stay, she told Jake as he prepared to head into town for supplies. You've already done more than enough. Jake paused in checking his gear. Mrs. Mitchell, can I speak plainly? Of course. Crane isn't going to give up. Those men who offered to help are good people, but they're not gunfighters. If this turns ugly, they could get hurt or killed trying to protect you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying I should just give in to him? No, ma'am. I'm saying you need to think about all your options. Maybe there's a way to solve this without bloodshed. Emma spoke up from where she was mending one of the baby's blankets. What kind of options? Jake hesitated, as if debating whether to share his thoughts. Well, you could sell the property to someone else before Crane can force your hand. Take the money and start fresh somewhere else. Sarah shook her head immediately. This is my home. James and I built it together. I won't be driven away by a bully. I understand that feeling, but you have to think about your son's safety too. Sarah looked down at her sleeping baby, feeling torn between her determination to keep her home and her need to protect her child. There might be another way, Jake continued. If you're willing to fight for this place, you need someone who knows how to fight, someone Crane will take seriously. Are you offering? Jake was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he met her eyes. I'm offering to stay until you're strong enough to make decisions about your future without pressure from anyone, including me. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'll help protect you and your son from Crane, but I won't try to control you or tell you what to do. When you're ready, you make your own choices about where to live, who to trust, and how to build your life. Sarah studied his face, looking for any hidden agenda. And what do you get out of it? The satisfaction of knowing a good woman and her child are safe from a man who thinks he can take whatever he wants. Emma looked up from her mending. That's quite an offer, Mr. Morrison. But what if Crane decides to come after you directly? Jake's expression hardened slightly. Then he'll discover I'm not as easy to push around as he might think. Sarah made her decision. If you're willing to stay and help, I'd be grateful. But I want to be clear about something. I won't be anyone's charity case. If you're going to work here, I'll find a way to pay you fairly. Mrs. Mitchell, you just had a baby. You don't need to worry about paying me right now. I need to worry about it because I need to keep my independence. If you work for me, then you answer to me, not the other way around. Jake smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Fair enough. How about room and board plus a small wage when you're able? Deal. Sarah extended her hand and Jake shook it respectfully. After Jake left for town, Emma helped Sarah with the baby while they discussed what this arrangement might mean. Are you sure about this? Emma asked. You barely know him? I know enough. He could have sided with Crane last night if he wanted money or power. Instead, he stood up for what was right. That tells me something about his character. But what if he's no better than Crane? What if helping you is just another way of taking control? Sarah had considered that possibility. Then I'll deal with that problem when it comes. Right now, Jake Morrison is offering protection without demanding anything inappropriate in return. That's more than I can say for Thomas Crane. When Jake returned from town several hours later, his expression was grim. He tied his horse to the hitching post and came inside carrying supplies and news. How bad is it? Sarah asked, reading his face. Crane's been busy. He's told everyone in town that you've accepted his proposal and the wedding will be next week. He's even ordered a dress from the seamstress. Sarah felt her anger flare. The nerve of that man! Did anyone question his story? A few people seemed surprised, especially since they knew you just had a baby. But Crane's got influence and people are afraid to challenge him directly. Emma shook her head in disgust. What did you tell them? I told anyone who'd listen that Mrs. Mitchell had refused Crane's proposal and was not planning to marry anyone. But I could see some folks didn't want to believe it because it meant trouble was coming. Sarah paced the small kitchen, her fists clenched. So he's trying to force my hand by making it public. If I don't marry him now, it'll look like I'm going back on my word. That's about the size of it. There's more. Sarah braced herself for worse news. Crane's filed a claim with the territorial government saying your late husband owed him money. He's demanding payment or foreclosure on your property. That's impossible. James never borrowed money from anyone, especially not Crane. I figured as much. But proving it might be difficult if Crane has forged documents. Sarah sank into a chair, feeling overwhelmed. So he's attacking me from every direction, socially, legally, financially. Jake sat down across from her, his expression serious but determined. Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know that whatever happens, you and your son won't face this alone. We'll find a way to fight back. Emma spoke up quietly. How do you fight someone who has that much power? The same way you fight anyone, Jake replied. You use your strengths against their weaknesses. Crane thinks he's already won because he has money and influence. That overconfidence might be his downfall. Sarah looked up at Jake with new hope. What do you have in mind? First, we need to gather evidence that your husband never borrowed money from Crane. Bank records, witness statements, anything that proves James's debts were elsewhere or non-existent. I can help with that, Emma offered. I know everyone James did business with. Second, we need to make sure the real story gets told around town. Not everyone is afraid of Crane, and some people value truth over convenience. And third, Jake's expression grew harder. We prepare for the possibility that Crane might try to take what he wants by force. Because if legal pressure and social manipulation don't work, men like him tend to resort to more direct methods. Sarah looked down at her sleeping baby and felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. No one, not Thomas Crane or anyone else, was going to threaten her child's future. Then we'd better get started, she said firmly. As the afternoon wore on, they made plans and preparations. Emma rode into town to speak with people who had done business with James, while Jake examined the property boundaries and considered defensive positions. Sarah spent the time getting to know the man who had volunteered to protect her family. She learned that Jake had served in the army during the Indian conflicts, which explained his alertness and tactical thinking. He had been drifting for several years, working various jobs, but never settling anywhere. What about your family in Montana? She asked as they watched the sun start to set. I don't actually have family there, Jake admitted. I just said that because I thought I'd be moving on after helping you last night. Why don't you have a home somewhere? Jake was quiet for a while, then said, I used to. Had a ranch in Texas with my brother, but we lost it in a drought, and he died trying to save the cattle. After that, I just never felt like putting down roots again. Sarah understood that kind of loss. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. It was a long time ago, but it taught me not to get too attached to places or people. Is that why you offered to help me? Because it's temporary? Jake looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Maybe it started that way, but things change and people change. Sometimes you find yourself fighting for something you didn't expect to care about. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, they heard horses approaching. Jake immediately moved to the window, then relaxed. It's the Henderson men, right on time. As Bill and his sons rode up to keep their promised watch, Sarah felt a sense of community and protection she hadn't experienced since James died. Between Jake's steady presence and the loyalty of her neighbors, maybe she could find a way to keep her home and her independence. But as darkness settled over Cedar Ridge, she also knew that Thomas Crane wasn't finished with her. The real test of everyone's resolve was still to come. 3 days passed peacefully, with the Henderson men taking turns watching Sarah's property and Jake working to repair fences and strengthen the cabin's defenses. Sarah was recovering well from childbirth, and her son was healthy and growing. For brief moments, she could almost forget about Thomas Crane. Then Emma returned from town with disturbing news. Crane's bringing the territorial judge here tomorrow, she announced, her face pale with worry. He's planning to hold a hearing about the supposed debt James owed him. Jake looked up from cleaning his rifle. Tomorrow? That's mighty fast for legal proceedings. Judge Morrison is Crane's cousin, Emma explained. He's been known to rule in favor of family interests before. Sarah felt her heart sink. So the hearing will be just for show. He's already decided to rule against me. That's about the size of it, Emma said. But there's more. Mrs. Patterson at the general store overheard Crane telling his men that if the legal approach doesn't work, they'll handle things the old-fashioned way tomorrow night. Jake's expression darkened. Meaning? Meaning he's planning to take what he wants by force. Sarah looked down at her baby, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. She had to make a decision that would affect both their futures. Emma, I want you to take the baby and go stay with Robert tonight. Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't have my son in danger. Sarah, I'm not leaving you alone to face this. She won't be alone, Jake said quietly. But your sister's right about the baby. Children shouldn't be anywhere near what's coming. Emma reluctantly agreed to take the baby to town, but insisted on returning herself. As she prepared to leave, Sarah held her son close, breathing in his sweet scent and memorizing the feel of his small body against her chest. I'm doing this for you, she whispered to him, so you can grow up free. After Emma left with the baby, the cabin felt strangely empty. Sarah found herself alone with Jake for the first time since the night he arrived. They spent the evening preparing for whatever Crane might bring, checking ammunition, planning defensive positions, and discussing escape routes if things went badly. You don't have to do this, Sarah told Jake as they worked. You could leave tonight, and no one would think less of you. Jake paused in barricading the windows. Would you think less of me? Sarah considered the question honestly. No. You've already done more than anyone could ask. Then why are you suggesting I leave? Because I'm afraid you'll get killed protecting someone you barely know, and I couldn't live with that on my conscience. Jake turned to face her fully. Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah, I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you or because I want something from you. I'm here because I believe in what you're fighting for, which is the right to live your life on your own terms, the right to say no to bullies like Crane, the right to protect your family without having to surrender your independence. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Those are good principles to fight for. I think so too, and I think your husband would have wanted someone to stand with you if he couldn't be here to do it himself. They worked in companionable silence until late in the evening, when Jake suggested Sarah get some rest while he kept watch. But Sarah found it impossible to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would determine her future and possibly Jake's life. She was still awake when Jake quietly knocked on her bedroom door. Sarah, you need to see this. She came out to find Jake at the window, watching a line of torches moving slowly up the road toward her property. Crane? Has to be. Looks like he decided not to wait for the judge. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. How many men? At least 10. Maybe more. Sarah moved to the other window and saw the lights spreading out to surround her cabin. Whatever Crane had planned, he was making sure she couldn't escape. What do we do? She whispered. We wait and see what he wants. Maybe he just plans to intimidate you into accepting his proposal. But both of them knew it was probably more serious than that. Men didn't surround a cabin with torches just to have a conversation. They didn't have to wait long. Crane's voice called out from the darkness. Sarah Mitchell, come out here. I want to talk to you. Jake positioned himself beside the front window with his rifle ready. What do you want to talk about, Crane? This doesn't concern you, Morrison. Send the woman out. Sarah moved to the door, but Jake caught her arm. Don't go out there. He'll just keep escalating if I don't face him. And he might hurt you if you do. Sarah looked into Jake's worried eyes and made her decision. I won't let him win through fear, but I won't go out there unarmed. She picked up the shotgun Jake had loaded for her earlier, then opened the door but stayed in the doorway where Jake could cover her. I'm here, Crane. What do you want? Thomas Crane stepped into the circle of torchlight, flanked by 6 armed men. Sarah could see more shapes moving in the darkness beyond them. I want you to stop this foolishness and accept reality, Crane said. You can't win this fight, Sarah. The judge will rule against you tomorrow and you'll lose your property anyway. But if you marry me tonight, I can protect you from that legal judgment. How convenient that you can protect me from a problem you created yourself. Crane smiled coldly. I'm trying to be generous, but my patience is running out. You have 1 minute to decide. Marriage or foreclosure. Jake appeared in the doorway beside Sarah, his rifle aimed at Crane. There's a third option you're forgetting. What's that? You and your men can turn around and leave. Mrs. Mitchell has made her feelings clear, and honorable men would respect that. Honor doesn't pay debts or protect widows, Morrison. Power does. Funny thing about power, Jake replied. It only works when people are afraid of it. Crane's expression turned ugly. You should be afraid. Both of you. I own this territory and I own the people in it. Sarah felt her anger override her fear. You don't own me, Thomas Crane. You never will. We'll see about that. Boys! At Crane's signal, his men raised their weapons. But Jake was already moving, pulling Sarah back into the cabin and slamming the door just as gunshots erupted outside. Stay down! Jake shouted over the noise of bullets splintering the wooden walls. Sarah crouched behind an overturned table, her shotgun ready. They're trying to kill us. No, they're trying to scare us into surrendering. If Crane wanted us dead, he would have started shooting without talking first. The gunfire stopped, and Crane's voice called out again. That was a warning. Next time we'll aim lower. Jake moved carefully to a window and peered out. They're spread out pretty good, but they're staying back from the cabin. Crane doesn't want to risk his men in a close fight. What's he waiting for? Probably hoping we'll panic and give up. But Sarah had no intention of giving up. This was her home, her future, her child's inheritance. If Thomas Crane wanted it, he would have to pay a price that might be higher than he was willing to accept. Crane, she called out. You want to talk? Then let's talk. But send your men back. This is between you and me. Sarah, what are you doing? Jake asked urgently. I'm going to end this once and for all. There was a long pause. Then Crane responded. Just the two of us? Just the two of us. Unless you're afraid to face a woman without your army. Jake gripped her arm. Sarah, this is too dangerous. He can't be trusted. I know he can't be trusted, but he can't afford to look like a coward in front of his men either. After a few minutes, Crane called out again. All right, Sarah, just you and me. But if Morrison tries anything, my men will cut him down. Understood. Sarah started toward the door, but Jake blocked her path. I can't let you do this. Yes, you can, because it's my choice to make. And what if he kills you? Then you make sure my son knows his mother died fighting for his freedom. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then slowly stepped aside. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Sarah Mitchell. Remember that if something happens to me. Sarah stepped out of the cabin and into the circle of torchlight. Crane was waiting for her, his gun holstered but his hand resting on the grip. You could have saved us all this trouble, he said as she approached. By surrendering my freedom to a man I don't love or respect? I don't think so. Love and respect are luxuries, Sarah. Survival is what matters. If survival means living as your property, then I choose something else. Crane's eyes hardened. You're choosing death then, for yourself and for Morrison. I'm choosing the right to make my own decisions about my life and my child's future." They stood facing each other in the flickering torchlight, two people with completely different ideas about power and freedom. Sarah could see the frustration and anger in Crane's face, but also something that surprised her: uncertainty. "You know what I think?" she said quietly. "I think you're not used to people saying no to you. I think you've become so accustomed to getting your way through intimidation that you don't know what to do when someone stands up to you." "I know exactly what to do." "Then do it. Stop talking and do it." Crane's hand tightened on his gun, but he didn't draw. Sarah realized she had been right. He was uncertain, perhaps even afraid. His power depended on people being too frightened to resist him. When someone called his bluff, he didn't know how to respond. "The thing is, Thomas, if you kill me, you'll never get what you really want." "Which is?" "Legitimacy, respect, the feeling that you've won fairly instead of just bullying people into submission." Crane's face flushed with anger. "I don't need legitimacy from anyone." "Yes, you do. That's why you wanted me to marry you instead of just taking my property by force. That's why you bothered with forged legal documents instead of just burning me out. You want people to think you're a respectable businessman, not just another outlaw with a gang." "Shut up. If you kill me tonight, everyone will know what you really are. You'll get my land, but you'll lose the thing you value most, the illusion that you're better than a common criminal." Sarah could see her words hitting their target. Crane was trapped between his desire for respectability and his need to maintain his reputation for getting what he wanted. "There's another problem, too," she continued. "Jake Morrison isn't just some drifting cowboy. He's a man with principles, and men like that are dangerous when you threaten innocent people. Even if you kill me, you'll still have to deal with him. And he's not going to be intimidated by your usual methods." Crane looked toward the cabin where Jake waited with his rifle. "Morrison is just one man who knows how to fight and has nothing left to lose. How many of your men are you willing to sacrifice to prove you can take what you want from a widow and her baby?" For the first time since she had known him, Thomas Crane looked uncertain of himself. Sarah pressed her advantage. "I'm going to make you an offer, Thomas. One time only. I'm listening. You withdraw your legal claim against my property. You stop telling people we're engaged. You leave me and my family alone. And I'll pretend this whole thing never happened. And if I refuse, then you'll find out how expensive it can be to fight people who have nothing left to lose." Crane was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. "And what about Morrison? What about him? He's made me look like a fool in front of my men. That can't go unanswered." Sarah realized this was the crux of the matter. Crane could live with losing her, but he couldn't afford to look weak in front of his followers. "Jake Morrison saved my life and my child's future. If you hurt him, I'll make it my mission to tell everyone in this territory exactly what kind of man you are. Your reputation will never recover." "You're threatening me?" "I'm promising you. Touch Jake Morrison, and I'll destroy what's left of your good name." Crane stared at her for another long moment, then slowly took his hand away from his gun. "You're making a mistake, Sarah. You could have had comfort, security, respect. Instead, you're choosing to struggle alone with a baby and a piece of ground that barely feeds you. I'm choosing freedom, and I'm not alone." Crane looked around at his men, then back at Sarah. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Because you're a businessman, not a killer. And killing me would be bad for business." Without another word, Crane turned and walked back toward his men. Sarah heard him giving quiet orders, and within minutes the torches were moving away from her property. Jake emerged from the cabin as the last of Crane's men disappeared into the darkness. "I can't believe that worked." "Neither can I," Sarah admitted, her legs suddenly shaky with reaction. "What you did was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. It was what needed to be done." Jake studied her face in the moonlight. "You realize he meant what he said about this not being over." I know, but I also know I showed him that I'm not afraid of him. That changes things between us. Maybe. But you should be prepared for him to try other methods. Men like Crane don't give up easily. Sarah nodded, but she felt different than she had before the confrontation. Stronger, more confident. She had faced down the most powerful man in the territory and lived to tell about it. Jake, I need to ask you something. What's that? When I said I wasn't alone, I meant it. But I need to know if you meant it too when you said you were staying. Jake was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Mrs. Mitchell, I think I've found something worth putting down roots for. My farm? Your courage, your independence, your determination to do what's right no matter what it costs. Sarah felt her heart flutter, but she also felt the need to be completely honest. I'm not ready for anything romantic, Jake. I just had a baby, I'm still grieving my husband, and I need time to figure out who I am as a single mother. I understand that. I'm not asking for romance. I'm asking for the chance to be part of something good, to help you build the kind of life you want for yourself and your son. And what kind of life is that? One where you're free to make your own choices. Where your son grows up understanding that strength comes from standing up for what's right, not from forcing others to submit. Sarah looked at this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most. He wasn't trying to rescue her from her problems. He was offering to stand with her while she solved them herself. That sounds like exactly the kind of life I want, she said. The next morning, Emma returned with the baby and news that Judge Morrison had left town without holding the planned hearing. Word had already spread about Crane's late-night visit to Sarah's property and his retreat without achieving his goals. People are talking, Emma reported. Some of them are saying maybe Thomas Crane isn't as powerful as everyone thought. Sarah held her son close, breathing in his sweet baby scent and feeling hope for the future. She had kept her home, her independence, and her dignity. But more importantly, she had shown her son and herself that freedom was worth fighting for. Jake had kept his word about staying, but he had also kept his promise not to try to control her decisions. He worked hard, treated her with respect, and slowly began to feel like part of the family rather than a hired protector. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to heal from childbirth and the trauma of Crane's threats. She also began to see Jake as more than just someone who had helped her in a crisis. He was a good man who understood that true strength came from protecting others without expecting them to surrender their independence in return. Thomas Crane never bothered her again. Whether it was because she had shown him the costs of forcing unwilling people or because he had found easier targets elsewhere, Sarah neither knew nor cared. What mattered was that she had proven to herself and to her community that some things were worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the opposition. Her son would grow up free, on land that belonged to his family, surrounded by people who understood that respect had to be earned, not demanded. And if he was very lucky, he would learn from Jake Morrison that real men protected others without trying to possess them. It wasn't the life Sarah had planned when she married James, but it was a good life built on principles that would last. In the end, that was all any parent could hope to give their child, the knowledge that freedom and dignity were worth any sacrifice, and the strength to defend those values when they were threatened. The cowboy who had stepped in to rescue her had given her something far more valuable than protection. He had given her the chance to save herself,